What's up again, guys? Brian here at 3TR, and welcome to episode 301 of People's Questions, the first episode of People's Questions in 2018. I would say we got a pretty solid episode, a much shorter episode than normal because we only got about 6 questions, but heck, that works for me. But I would say that they're all some pretty damn good questions. The first question, and I would say by far my favorite question of the episode, comes from Kenny Kusimo. Hope I said that right. And you want to know, in terms of both storytelling, characterization, who is my chosen author between these three writing from the old Star Wars canon, between Matthew Stover, Drew Karpyshyn, and James Luceno, or Sarno? That's a tough one, because those are definitely three of the all-time greats. But if I had to pick one, probably would have to go with Matthew Stover, simply because he did write two of, personally, my favorite novels, and that is Revenge of the Sith and Shatterpoint. Honestly, I could probably thank Matthew for help making Revenge of the Sith my favorite Star Wars movie of all time, because after I saw that movie, I knew there was something very, very special, but I want to know more about what was really going on in the background, and that's where this novel came forward. And I can honestly say that it was because of the novel that it helped elevate my appreciation for Revenge of the Sith, which, you know, solidified it for being my all-time favorite Star Wars movie of all time. And while I do like the Darth Bane trilogy from Drew Karpyshyn, and I'm really, really impressed with the Darth Plagueis novel from James Lucero, I think that in terms of characterization, I think that Matthew Stover simply knows how to work with, say, I like to call the prequel era, which personally for me, I've always said I think the prequel era is a much better story. It just wasn't executed as well as the original trilogy. So if I had to pick, I would definitely go with Matthew Stover, hands down, in terms of characterization and telling stories in an era that I'm personally more fond of. I would say the prequel era is probably my favorite era to tell stories in, you know, definitely above the original trilogy, or if anything happens afterward, or even the Old Republic. The next question comes from Alu Cerna, and you want to know, if Nemesis had adamantium in his skeleton and was given Wolverine claws but bigger and no longer, would his healing factor help him survive the metal poisoning? It might help him live longer, because here's the thing about the whole poisoning thing. Even if it didn't, even if eventually it would kill him, you have to remember that Nemesis would last a very, very long time. You have to remember that Wolverine lived for centuries. So I don't think the whole poisoning thing would be your biggest issue. I think your biggest issue with Nemesis, if he did have an adamantium skeleton, would be, would his programming hold up? I mean, ostensibly, this guy would outlive the people who created him. Could you keep that system intact? Could you keep it updated? I think the whole adamantium poisoning thing would be the last thing you would have to worry about. You wouldn't have to worry about that till several centuries. So honestly, that's like the last thing I think you would really have to worry about. The next question comes from Cassidy J. Williams, and you want to know, what is the absolute worst Happy Madison comedy movie I've ever seen in my life? Jack and Jill. I don't know what the fuck Adam Sandler was thinking. That personally, I don't like actors that like to go drag. I mean, it's bad enough when Tyler Perry does it, and he's built an entire movie empire from that, which I personally am not a fan of. But for him to do it, that was like the lowest I've ever seen Adam Sandler, and I think he's a pretty decent actor, and he's a pretty good comedic actor in my opinion, and he can have his serious moments, but I don't know what he was doing in that. And then there was that whole Al Pacino coffee thing, which I think if you see the video online, I think his reaction at the end, I'm not sure he was acting at that point where he says, you need to burn this. No one can ever see it. I don't know. I feel kind of bad for him, but yeah, Jack and Jill, by far the worst. Next question comes from Yoda Date, and you want to know, who is my favorite Mortal Kombat girl and who would I date? In terms of my number one Mortal Kombat girl, I would have to go by far with Mileena. Definitely. If they ever do bring back that tag team element from Mortal Kombat 9, my favorite tag team partnership by far was bringing Scorpion and Mileena together. But in terms of who I would date, I damn sure would not date Mileena because, well, you know, let's just say she's got some dental problems. I wouldn't date Sonya. Sonya's too much of a bitch. If Johnny Cage gets annoyed with her, I know I wouldn't last very long. Probably would not date Katana. I have just me. I personally don't like the idea of dating a woman that's significantly older than I am. So if I had to narrow it down, it would probably come down to maybe Cassie Cage or Jackie Briggs. Probably one of those two. I mean, it's really just out of which one is probably the most suitable, but it would probably be one of those two that I would consider dating. Next question comes from Jake Albanet, and you wanted to know, whenever the Final Fantasy fighting game Dissidia are canon or not in the main Final Fantasy series. Basically, you want to know if Dissidia is canon. There are some people that think it's canon. I personally don't think it is not. To me, the Dissidia franchise, or the 3 games that we have for it, it's basically one big what-if scenario. It's like, well, what if we took certain characters from all the Final Fantasy games and we put them all into one game? And does it have its own story? Yes, but it's kind of loosely connected from my experience. I don't really see too many connections between, say, the first Dissidia and the second one. I'm not sure if that's going to continue into the third one. I think its own mythos is okay, but I personally don't consider it canon. It's its own separate thing. And the last question of the episode comes from TequilicoMan91, and you want to know, would you be open to posting an interview on your channel of your favorite game developers or gamers or figures in gaming and broad of your channel? Maybe even actors or directors. Yeah, sure. If someone ever wanted to interview me, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I recently did an interview maybe a month or 2 ago. I didn't see the video, but this college student contacted me on Facebook and asked if he could interview me, and the interview was really fast. I was just giving him pretty basic answers about, you know, what got me started in YouTube, and, you know, how to, you know, my filming process, and what programs do I use, and how do I decide how to structure my videos, and how do I choose my topics, stuff like that. So yeah, if anyone would really want to interview me and post on my channel, I'd be happy with that. And with that, those are all the questions that you guys sent in for this week. I'd like to thank the 6 of you for sending in your questions for the first episode of the People's Questions in 2018. I know that there were a few more questions, so if you didn't hear them in this video, be sure to check the comment section for episode 300, because chances are they're answered there. And if any of you guys have any questions you'd like me to answer in next week's episode, be sure to type them in the comments down below. Make sure to get them into me before next Wednesday, before I start filming the episode. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will see you next time.